Welcome to Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we provide a scientifically proven lifestyle for long-term health and fat loss by eating more and exercising less, but smarter.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor here with another bonus Smarter Science of Slim podcast. And I'm very, very excited about today's show because we have a gentleman who has a special place in my heart because he is doing a type of cooking and an approach to cooking and an approach to health that I think is wonderful and fun and certainly hits home with me and my approach to cooking. He is none other than the proprietor of the wonderful website, Macheesmo.com. That's Macheesmo.com. Nick Evans, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jonathan. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, Nick, thank you so much for joining us. And really quickly, Nick, well, not actually really quickly, take your time. Tell us a bit about your story and your mission to get people to put down the menus and pick up their spatulas.
Yeah, sure. So my whole thing is I think that, people need to spend more time in their kitchens. They pay rent or mortgages for their kitchens, and then a lot of times they just sit there. So I'm trying to encourage people to get in there, make a mess, make some delicious meals, and hopefully end up healthier for it also. So.
Well, I think it's very exciting, Nick. And one irony that I've noticed just about our culture recently, especially the younger culture, which I know you and I are proud members of, is there's definitely this sense of DIY or do it yourself and all this like radical customization and personalization, but maybe at the same time there's not the same sense in terms of that for food. Like right. Let's customize, let's personalize, let's do it yourself in the kitchen, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is, I don't know about your social group, but I know a lot of times my social group, the emails will be passed around or whatever, and it's always about, hey, let's go out to eat on this day, or let's hit up this new restaurant. And that's great. I mean, I like restaurants as much as the next guy, but I think there is almost a lost or soon to be lost art of like the dinner party, right? Like having people over, having a sit down meal that you cook, or that somebody cooks for you if you get a group of people that are excited about cooking. And I think the important thing also is that can actually be a lot healthier. You know what you're putting into the food. You know where you're getting the ingredients from. And regardless of what style of eating you're trying to accomplish, I mean, it's going to be healthier if you make it at home. That's pretty much across the board true, I think. So that's what I'm trying to get people to do.
Nick, I think you hit the nail on the head there, and that's something that is very underappreciated by people, and that is really regardless of what you're cooking. If you take dish A cooked at home and dish A cooked outside of the home, we will not use, generally people don't use safflower oil. Like you don't even buy, these like really weird hydrogenated trans oils. I mean, we might maybe use them, but restaurants definitely use them. So
and in huge quantities too. I can give you an example actually, John, from my last week of my life, right? And this is far away from sane eating necessarily, but I'll try to. But just to give you an idea.
Well, no, and it's saner is always good.
I can be saner in this in this example. But my wife, she occasionally loves a good milkshake, right? And I like a good milkshake occasionally too. It's not something we do a lot, but occasionally, she's having a rough day and she's like, I really want a milkshake. So this happened a few days ago it was probably, 7:30 or something, right? We had already had dinner and everything. And she was like, can you just go out? I try to not keep like a lot of sweets in the house and stuff like that because I tend to eat them all if they're here. So she was like, can you just go out and get me a milkshake? And I said, no, but I will go to the store and buy a good version of ice cream that I like and come home and make you a milkshake, right? And so just for fun, I sort of did the calculations on what my milkshake was versus if I would have went to, any fast food chain or any restaurant in town and bought a milkshake. And I mean, it was a huge difference. It was like half the calories, half the fat. And it was totally filling. It hit that spot that she was looking for, just a little sweet something, and got the job done. And just by, I mean, I made a chocolate milkshake at home just by basically importing the work, right, and doing it at home. I mean, we saved like 400 calories a serving. It was a pretty drastic savings. And I didn't put healthy stuff in it. It was a milkshake. but the restaurant version of that is going to be killer. I mean, it's going to be huge and, high fructose corn syrup and all kinds of stuff. So, even if you're being insane, you can be more sane if you're at home. Does that make sense?
It absolutely. I mean, and let's even, I'll call it even maybe accidental sanity, because I think let's just look at it from an economic perspective, Nick, because you hit the nail on the head. Like, if I own a restaurant, my job is the only thing that matters to me is how the food tastes. So creating delicious food as economically as possible. That is it. Now, if you're cooking at home, I don't care how little you think you care about health. You have some semblance in your brain, even on a subconscious level, of like, there may be a sense of guilt if you do something that like the restaurant wouldn't have. So like, you look at even like you're saying, smoothies. If you look at the nutritional profiles of some of these healthy smoothies at like Jamba Juice,
oh man,
it's just nuts. And if you tried to do that at home, like, you would probably use a whole apple. You wouldn't use artificial apple juice that gives you 80 grams of sugar in one of these healthy smoothies. It's just like, you can't not eat healthier if you eat at home.
Right. I do this kind of post on Macheesmo. I try to do it about once a month. I think it's really fun. It's called Guess the Food, and food is kind of in quotation marks. and basically what it is I go to the store and I pick out a random sort of processed food kind of thing. The most recent one I did was vitamin water. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the vitamin water.
I am.
And so what I do is I list on the site, right, the ingredients and the nutritional breakdown of it. And then people try to guess what it is. Because like, if I told you, all right, here's a recipe, like it's like tomatoes, chicken stock, whatever, you're going to be like, oh, it's probably a soup, right? But I mean, if you look at the ingredients in vitamin water, the second ingredient's like sugar. It's weird to look at, and I think people don't recognize, how much sugar and stuff like that is in some of these products until it's like right in front of them. In fact, I even weighed out the amount of sugar that vitamin water puts and took a photo of it because I thought it was a shocking amount of sugar. And so, one of the things I would challenge people to do if they don't think that these food companies are adding a lot of sugar is measure it out and then try to put it in your coffee or tea in the morning. like just to see the amount of added stuff these companies are doing, just to get it to taste good, right? Like like you said, I mean, that is their job. That's how they make their living. That's how they make their money. And they're really good at it. Like, I mean, it's, sometimes it's hard to compete with the taste that these companies are developing because they have engineers and chefs and scientists and who knows what. So yeah, they're going to be really good at it, but that doesn't mean that it's good for you. And it doesn't mean that you should be like feeding it to your family on a regular basis.
Nick, you hit on 2 points there that I think are just so spot on, and that was a crystallization of what I was trying to say earlier, but I really don't think I communicated well, which is, if you were to try to create Coke, like if you were to try to make Coke in your kitchen, you would be like, you would naturally never put that much sugar in that little of a fluid, because intuitively you would be like, wait, what? Like, you would not put 10 teaspoons of, you'd be like, that's too much sugar. I don't need 10 teaspoons. Why would I need 10? I'll use 7. I mean, like, you won't use 10.
There would be some level that you would do, and it would almost absolutely be less than what's in the real thing.
And the other thing that I really, really liked was, like, when you're cooking in your kitchen, if you buy your ingredients from the grocery store and they have, even if they're conventional, even if they're not locally grown, like, they're more than likely going to taste, they're going to have a more robust taste than the whatever, Monsanto or Kraft is going to use. So you will also, so not only intuitively will you just add less garbage, but as you're tasting it, you will need to add less garbage because the natural taste of the food will be stronger as it's fresher and things like that.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, if you make I'm trying to think of an example of like say you make like a beef chili at home, right? And you use like a nice grass-fed piece of beef, super healthy, great flavor, hard to beat the flavor, right? And yeah, it might take a little time, but then you have this great pot of chili that you can snack on for a few days. Or if you take a stroll through the freezer aisle and buy like whatever I don't even know what prepared chilies are out there these days, but I'm sure they exist. Whatever that is, I mean, they're using the worst of the worst ingredients. I mean, yeah, they're using beef, but it's hard to even call it that probably. And so, yeah, you're going to have an immediate flavor difference just because you're using quality ingredients, and they don't have to be expensive. I mean, even if you're not using grass-fed beef, right? Like just using normal stuff and cooking it right and treating it well, and you're going to end up with a great product. So, and your family's going to love it, and you'll feel better for it too. So.
Nick, you made another point there, which I like and I really want to dig into, and that's you mentioned it might take a little bit more time, and I think that is really, really important because so often if we have even a passing goal of improving our health, and I'm not saying we want to go run a triathlon or we want to go, be on the cover of a magazine or we want to be, perfect human health, but just maybe it's January 2nd and we're like, I really should do something to be healthier. I feel like many of us, we naturally are like, okay, I'm going to join a gym or I'm going to go run for an hour. Like we automatically turn to exercise when if we would even take like a third of the time we throw at exercise and redirect it into the kitchen, that would so much, that would do so much good for our health and so much more good for our health than, like, for example, if you were to spend 3 hours a week in the kitchen, you would derive so many more health benefits than if you spent 3 hours a week in the gym, at least in my experience.
Oh yeah, it pays huge dividends. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And part of what it's so funny because when I talk to people and I tell them what I do, obviously I cook a lot. And if your listeners browse through the site, I mean, not everything I make is necessarily SANE, right? There's some recipes on there that they look rich and they are rich, frankly, So, but I also have a lot of healthy recipes and I mix and match and all that stuff. But when I talk to people about it, they're always like, man, how are you thin? How do you not weigh 400 pounds? And I mean, sure, I do work out, but I don't work out. I mean, I'm not like a gym rat. I'm not at the gym for hours every day. I do normal active stuff, but I think it's really just because I eat out maybe once a month. I mean, maybe, my wife and I eat almost every meal at home, and I have my hands directly on almost everything we eat. I have direct say in every recipe, every meal. And I think, those little increments of calories and health and nutrition, I mean, those add up to a healthy eating plan, that's it. I mean, if you just take the initiative to spend a little more time in the kitchen, picking good ingredients at the store, learning how to cook. I mean, there is some skill involved, right? But if you do all that, it's going to pay dividends and you're going to be healthier and happier for it. So,
Nick, that you hit the nail on the head there because it is hard to describe. Like if you just use single ingredients and you combine them into your own concoction, you will naturally never ingest substances that you would ingest if you didn't do that. And the thing is only becoming clear in the mainstream now is that is about way more than just calories. Like when you ingest certain types of processed refined oils, like it causes inflammation in the area of your brain that regulates your appetite, and it is no longer able to do that effectively. So now you will overeat, but you're not overeating because you're a glutton. You're overeating because your brain is inflamed from these chemicals that are it's being marinated in, for like to use a pun of sorts. So and that's why people say, well, my grandmother ate rich foods and she ate potatoes, Jonathan, and so two things. One, well, the foods she ate are actually not, I mean, Dr. Davis does a great job of this in Wheat Belly. Like the wheat of 50 years ago is not the wheat today. No. So it's still, it's not even an apples to apples comparison. But besides that, she prepared those foods in her home. So there's an entire class of substances that she was never exposed to that we are exposed to. So Nick, I think you're exactly right. Like if our listeners did nothing else other than for 21 days, only eat food you prepared.
Yeah.
You like that. And it can be delicious, but just try that.
Yeah, you're going to be more sane just by doing that. I mean, it's that's step one for me in healthy eating. And if I had to give a step two, I would say, just like general knowledge, I guess, about you did a great interview a few weeks ago where you guys were talking about reading nutrition labels and stuff. And I think it's one of the most important skills. I wish they taught it in school. I mean, people do not know how to read nutrition labels, and it's a killer. I mean, it's if you don't know what you're putting into your body, how are you going to know what the results are going to be? Like you can't predict the results if you don't predict the inputs. Does that make sense?
Oh, it absolutely does. Well, and speaking of inputs, Nick, one of the things that I like that you do with your recipes is certainly you have some elaborate recipes, but
Sure.
You also have some, what Carrie, my podcast co-host, would call, it's a little bit more like assembly. Like it's just take A, B, and C, mix it together, and you're good to go. Those are my kind of recipes. That's how I cook. I love that. So can we talk a little bit more about those kinds of recipes?
Yeah, sure. So I have a whole section on my site that I categorize as quick and easy. And sometimes those are the same thing, meaning that it's quick and easy. But sometimes it could be quick or it could be easy, right? So, a lot of salads on the meal there, a lot of like quick sort of Asian style meals where you like stir fry a bunch of vegetables together I like really spicy food, so I usually throw in like lots of hot peppers and stuff like that, but that's obviously pretty optional. Especially in the winter, I was on a big stew kick this year, so lots of like cabbage stews and stuff like that. So really healthy, but it's not hard stuff. Like you could make a lot of these. You can make almost all of the recipes in this category, which there are, 200, I think I have in this one category. You can make them all in a weeknight. I mean, it's not, 30 minutes maybe tops we're talking about. So it's not, it's not necessarily hard. You can sort of plan a meal plan around the time you have. So on the weekends for me, right, like I like to cook a little bit longer meals. Like I made an Indian dish over the weekend that I posted at the beginning of the week. And, it took 5 hours. It was a 5-hour recipe. And I don't sugarcoat it, like it is what it is. It takes 5 hours if you want to make it right. But was it worth it? Absolutely. My wife and I ate it for a few days. It was delicious. And we loved it. So my website has, I try to provide recipes for whether you have a lot of time, a little time, like whatever. You can find something that hopefully will get you in the kitchen and get you excited about making a homemade meal. So
Nick, and that is important for people to realize, is that just like we talk about for exercise or for eating in general, don't let the pursuit of perfection scare you off. Like just because you quote unquote don't know how to cook, like here's a formula that I use. And Nick, I'd like your take on this, because I've honestly in my years on this earth, I have never followed a recipe. It's just not my style. Like I just, that's just how I am in life in general. I'm like, I don't follow recipes, and I like to just kind of figure it out on my own. So
don't conform to your recipe.
Yeah, exactly. You're the man and his recipes trying to hold me down. No. Well, here's what I do. So I start with well, I don't start with, but component one is a nutrient dense protein. So,
Sure.
meat or fish, basically. So
Right.
nutrient dense protein, and then non-starchy vegetables,
Right.
and then a seasoning or a sauce that I create.
Very important.
And that's literally it. And I'm cooking delicious, quote unquote. I think they're delicious, and my wife thinks they're delicious. But you just take a piece of salmon, you sear it, you put some seasoning on it. You've got some kale. Like last night, I boiled up some kale, and I took some mushrooms, which were, they were canned. They were canned mushrooms, but I like the taste of canned mushrooms, and I'm not here to be perfect. And I put some all natural tomato sauce in there. I put a little bit of Parmesan cheese in there, some garlic salt, some Italian seasoning. That was our side dish. Hey, that took me 10 minutes, and it was delicious.
Right. Now, so if you would have ordered that in a restaurant, right? Like, what do you think the changes would have been to how it was prepared? Like, even if it looked the same on the menu, right? Like what would they have done differently? They probably would have used way more salt than you used. They probably would have used a really weird kind of oil to cook the fish in, right? They probably would have the tomato sauce they used probably would have been 50% sugar.
Yep.
And the greens. I mean, I'm assuming you use fresh kale.
Absolutely.
They probably had like frozen kale that was cooked somewhere in a factory, like a month ago. I don't know. And they would have thrown it together on a plate and charged you $15 for it. So I mean, yeah, that's perfect. I mean, if everybody ate that even a few times a week, I mean, we would shed pounds as a nation.
Well, and Nick, one of the things that I'm curious your take here on how individuals can really identify what makes something taste good to them. Now, let me give you an example here. Sometimes I get some flack because I am just as selective as I am. I recommend that people, pick your protein sources in terms of like what are the most nutrient dense proteins. I say pick your carbohydrates in the same kind of way, like shoot for low fructose fruits like citrus and berries rather than high fructose fruits like apples. And I say the same thing with fats, as I say, be intentional with your healthy fats and pick the ones that are either going to be the healthiest for you or the ones that are going to give you the most pleasure. Let me give you an example of picking one that gives you the most pleasure. And then I'm hoping you could tie this back to just picking what makes you the happiest from a taste perspective. So with my kale last night, most people, when they talk about cooking kale, at least in the health community, are always talking about cooking it with a bunch of coconut oil, which is fine. And if you do that, coconut oil is wonderful for you and it is delicious. However, using kale in the way I was using, the taste of the side dish I made came from the marinara sauce, and it came from the Parmesan cheese and from the seasonings I added. So I could have cooked my kale in coconut oil. I could have, but it was unnecessary from a taste perspective. Like I could boil it, and that's also a gentler way of cooking it, because anytime you cook with water, that's more gentle on the food and is helpful from a nutritional perspective. But I wasn't doing that because I feared fat. I was doing that because the savory taste of fat that I wanted to focus on in this dish was coming from the Parmesan cheese. So I was just being intentional about it. So how can we, like, as we start to get in the kitchen, really focus on dialing up certain flavors and figuring out what flavors really work for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot about experimentation. Like you have to try a few different things to see if it's going to work for you. I mean, one example that I learned a few years ago that I still use all of the time, and I think is really undervalued, especially in American cooking, I don't know why, is acids. Like in your kale example, right? Like the acid is missing from that recipe, right? And the marinara sauce does give it some, but you could literally eliminate all the oil from that recipe. Like you could steam your kale, right? And then toss it in a hot pan, and the water from the steaming will give it a little lubrication, if you will, right? And then all you got to do is hit it with like half a lemon. Just squeeze half a lemon over it, and then toss it with, a little bit of your marinara sauce, a little bit of your Parmesan cheese, which is a great fat to add to that to give it a little saltiness and all that. And you will not miss the oil. you won't even notice. I mean, it's so a lot of it is about knowing how to provide flavor. Like fat is cheap flavor, right? Like it's the easy way to get flavor into a dish.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can, I mean, yeah, if you're consciously adding it, that's great. Like please trust me, I like that.
Nick is like, let me tell you about.
Like, let me tell you, like, I mean, I'm a butter fiend, right? Like, I'm not afraid to use butter in a dish, but I do it actively. And in a dish like that, I'm like, hey, a little lemon is going to do this dish more favors than a little butter or a little oil. So it's about knowing, and the only way you know that is just to try stuff. I mean, try some things from different cultures like fish sauce that provide like crazy savory flavors to dishes that we just don't have the equivalent to in America, and so once you learn to play around with that kind of stuff, then it almost becomes second nature to say like, oh, well, this dish doesn't even need any oil. I mean, it's not a dish, it's not a stir fry, right? It's a side of steamed vegetables with some marinara sauce and lemon. Like that's what it is. That's the recipe.
The way you characterize that, I think I might have to borrow moving forward, Nick. I'll certainly give you credit, but you said they're using fats is not bad, but in some ways it's kind of the least common denominator. Like if you take onion, I mean, look at onion rings, right? I mean, that's what these fried things are. Like, you want to make an onion taste better? Well, just deep fry it in fat. Like, yeah, it's going to taste better. I get it. But there's also other ways to do that. And if you do those other ways, you don't like to then add fat in some ways. It's just kind of like, well, why? Like, you don't need to. It's not because you're afraid of fat. It's just because you're cooking and you're being conscious. There's no fear involved.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I love that, Nick. I love that, Nick. Well, tell me a little bit about, I know you've got a cookbook in the works, which is exciting. Tell me a bit about this cookbook and how it's going to be as unique as your website.
Sure, yeah. So the cookbook has been a labor of love for it's going to be 3 years. Finally found a publisher for it, super excited about it. And the whole premise of the book, right, is about leftovers. So I think there is this issue with cooking in America where people feel like they have to start from scratch every day. Mm-hmm. Like when you get ready to prepare a meal, maybe you pop open your favorite cookbook or you whatever it is, or you go to your favorite website and it's always like step 1, get out your raw ingredients, right? But the truth is real chefs, like people even in restaurants, like they don't cook that way. Like yesterday's leftovers become today's special, right? Mm-hmm. They use them in soups or they figure out a new way to repurpose old stuff. So the book is featured around 14 dishes that people tend to have in their fridge if they cook regularly, right? So stuff like leftover chicken or a little bit of leftover fish you might have, right? And so at the beginning of every chapter, it tells you how to make those things appropriately. So like there's a whole chapter on roast salmon, right? Where the first recipe is like, well, step 1, you need to know how to make great salmon, right? So there's a recipe for that. And the idea is that you make these dishes in bulk when you have the time. So you make like a whole side of salmon, right? And you roast it and it's delicious and you can eat it as a meal on day 1, but then you can use it throughout the week in these other recipes in the chapter. So each chapter is based around one of those. And the idea is that it helps with meal planning. It's going to save people time and money and just teach people how to cook efficiently, right? Like you're using stuff you have on hand rather than running to the store every day to get a whole new list of stuff to make tonight's dinner. So that's the idea behind the book. And I'm pretty excited about it. I think it'll be out in early 2014.
Well, I love that, Nick. Well, we might be sharing some shelf space there because my next book is coming. Maybe we can do a package deal.
Yeah, sure.
Well,
Amazon.
Well, Nick, what I really like about that approach is when someone thinks I have to cook at home, they may just say, okay, well, I've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Okay, there's 7 days in a week. Okay, so you're telling me I need to cook 21 times. Okay, each time is going to take at least a half hour. So I'm not going to cook at home. Shut up. I'm not going to listen to you. So
abort mission.
But that's not at all what we're saying, right?
No, that is not what we're saying.
And in fact, if you cook, especially with these cooking in bulk and freezing things, literally every time I cook for 2 or 3 or 4 meals.
Right.
And that makes life so much easier.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And if you're cooking great recipes, it doesn't matter if you eat the same thing a few days later, right? It's like, it's delicious then also.
Well, exactly. And there's also this somewhat, I think, it's just not true that individuals who are not cooking at home eat this amazing variety, because like a hamburger and French fries and hamburger and French fries and pizza and Coke and hamburger and French fries and pizza and Coke is kind of the same thing over and over again too.
Yeah, good point. I mean, to me, really, I consider most pizza that you buy in stores and in restaurants to be horrible. So like a bad mushroom pizza and a bad pepperoni pizza taste the exact same. Like, they're both like really not good pizza. So like, all right, great. I'm just going to skip it. Thanks.
Oh, I love it, Nick. Well, this is incredibly helpful. And folks, I hope you can hear in Nick's voice his passion and his dedication to a saner approach to food. And again, you don't have to be perfect, not at all. But
I'm far from it, trust me.
But just bring that in home, take control of what's going into your body, and you will be surprised how easily you can actually take control of your health. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate the time.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for the opportunity, Jonathan. It was really fun.
No, I love it. Well, and folks, if you want more of Nick, I'd love to have him back on the show. But in the meantime, please visit his website, which is macheesmo.com. Again, that's macheesmo.com. And be on the lookout for his first cookbook, which is in the works. Nick, thank you again.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jonathan. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you then. Hey, listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did. Certainly, Nick Evans, a wonderful guy, a great inspiration, and a great guide in the kitchen. Please check out his work. And remember, this week and every week after, you can eat more and exercise less. Just do it smarter. Talk with you soon. Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like the podcast and if there's other ways we can help you, please join us in the Smarter Science of Slim support group, which is freely available at the Smarter Science of Slim website, smarterscienceofslim.com. There you'll find all kinds of free recipes and success stories and just all kinds of fun stuff like how to help your kids go sane and just great community content.
And just one last thing before you go, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes and up onto Amazon.com and leaving us a review, and then going over to Facebook and liking us, we would hugely appreciate it.